Howdy everybody, and welcome to House Calls with Luke. I'm Luke Brown, your host, and I go around the country doing house calls with people that have problems with their horses. I address those problems and help horses develop a safer and better relationship with their horse. So today we have a horse named Sonny, and I'm going to have Steve just tell you a little bit about Sonny and what his issue is.
So Sonny's he's about a 10-year-old saddlebred cross, we think. He came to me as a rescue about 6 years ago, and he's been through several clinics and a lot of training, but he's been setting through the summer. Nobody's ridden him, so he gets very difficult when we're not working with him consistently to get the bridle on it. So we're going to work on that this morning to see how we can get him more consistent at accepting the bridle when we're ready to saddle him up.
Okay, awesome. And when you say he's difficult to put the bridle on, what are the things that he does that makes it difficult?
He's really reactive, so like you can see right now, he's ready to pull back. He's not ready to move forward with me. So obviously we have some other holes we need to work on, but he'll throw his head back and move his head from side to side.
Okay.
Now, once we get him going, he's really good about dropping his head and getting the bridle on. But again, it's just we're figuring out some consistent patterns that I can use with him to get him to be more willing.
Okay, one of the first things that I like to do when I'm working with a horse for bridling purposes is not work with the bridle at first. I want to address the issues with the head, the reactivity with the head and the mouth first before I do bridling. Now, does he bite at all? Okay, but he wants to smell me a lot, so maybe I'll just let him smell me for a minute. He's trying to check me out, see who I am here. One of the biggest mistakes that people make when they're trying to bridle a horse is they take the bridle and they go to bridle the horse, and the horse is being reactive and they're having a hard time and they're flustered and the horse is flustered and they're way up here trying to get it done. This is not where we want to get bridling done. We want to get bridling done down here. So the key is to get my horse to not be reactive to my hands, to teach him to lower his head, teach him to open his mouth. See that? When I just touched the corner of his mouth, he just did that. So I want to, right there. So he's very, very sensitive in his mouth. And I want to make sure that I can move around his muzzle and get my fingers in his mouth before I even try to get my bit in the mouth. Secondly, once I get him where he's comfortable with my fingers in his mouth, then I'm going to use this rope, this nice yacht lead rope. It's a 14-foot lead rope that's 5/8 inch, right? 5/8 inch, and this is what I like to use in my training program. I'm going to take that and get him used to putting that in his mouth, and then we'll go to the bridle. So the bridle has a bit, it has the metal bit usually, and that can really bother horses at first, and especially if it clanks on their teeth and it can scare them. Their teeth typically aren't that sensitive, but the vibration can cause them to be scared of that. So let's work first and foremost on lowering his head, making sure I can get him to lower his head. A couple ways you can do it. If you got a real tall horse, now I'm a tall guy, I'm 6'4.5", and he's a pretty tall horse. So if, let's say I was this tall like my wife, right? How is she going to get up there and get her arm over his head? If you can't reach high enough to get your arm over the head, then you want to use your hand up behind the ears. If you can reach over the neck, I like to use the crease of my elbow and put it right over the top of him, and then I'll use this halter to control his head. Now if he throws his head up, my arm can just fly off, right? So I don't want to lock into where he's going to pull my shoulder out of joint, but if he picks his head up real fast, it's not that hard for my arm to just come off. Then another point of safety is my head needs to be tilted away. My shoulder and my chest need to be the first thing to get hit if he throws his head. Some of these horses can get very reactive and toss their head, and if you're in here with your head close to their head, you're going to get hit in the face. I know somebody I've worked with who has a cousin who literally got killed from a horse that he had this horse was down. I think he was actually drinking some water, and the kid had his head up over the top of this horse's head. The horse got scared and raised his head up, hit him in the face, in the jaw, and killed him. So it's crazy. I mean, that's the most extreme example. At best case, you're going to get hurt. In worst case, you're going to get killed. So you want to keep your head away from your horse's head. Do not try to headbutt your horse. They have a stronger head than you do, trust me on that one. So I'm going to crease my elbow over the top of the neck, and then I put my right hand on his cheek right here. And then my left hand is down here at the clip, or the snap. So I'm just going to, what I'm going to do is use the hand with the snap and the halter, and I'm going to rock back and forth with that, and at the same time I'm going to put a little pressure with my elbow on the top of his head. Now, see how I keep my head kind of out of his way? When he lowers his head, I'm going to rub on him and let him feel good about that. What I'm doing is trying to break free that resistance that he's given me. So if he gives me any resistance, I'm just going to break that free by rocking back and forth and pushing down. Now right there, he's got a lot of resistance. Wait for him. And then when he releases and goes down, release that pressure. So that's the first thing. You want to make sure to get your horse lowering his head. The more you do this, the more when you go to bridle him, all you have to do is, the first cue is going to be just put your hand up here behind his ear on top of his poll. And if you have to, squeeze just a little bit. And if he should start to lower his head. If he doesn't lower his head, you can squeeze a little bit more. Now this is if you don't have your elbow up over him, and then you can rock back and forth. And of course he's already down in position I want him. Let's see if I can get him up, okay? Now let's do the same thing. Put my fingers back behind, so the thumb's behind one ear, my middle finger's behind the other ear, and then I just rock back and forth. A little bit of pressure, rock back and forth. Good, and when he breaks free and releases and comes down, I'm just gonna rub on him, but keep your head out of the way. Good, I like that. Now, as you saw, he's very, very reactive to me touching the corner of his mouth. So next thing we're gonna do is I'm not gonna worry too much about his head position right now, but I'm just gonna rub on his muzzle. We've got a horse at home right now that's very sensitive on his muzzle. So I'm gonna try to stick with him, rub on his muzzle, and then retreat to an easier place. I wanna wait till he relaxes a little bit and then retreat to an easier spot for him. So between his eyes, he doesn't seem to have an issue. Down here on his nose, he does. So if he tolerates it for a little bit, retreat and rub on him. I just want to get him used to my hand on his muzzle. If your horse doesn't like you around his mouth, he's not going to bridle easily. Let's get underneath him. Oh, and I remember he was in at one of our clinics, and he is a very dominant personality.
Yes.
So he doesn't really like that, and then he's kind of, see how he switched his tail? He's telling me he doesn't like that, but so I'm not going to bother him a whole lot with this, but I'm going to make sure that he's not being overreactive to it. Okay, next thing I'm going to do is work on the corner of his mouth. So I might take the halter in my right hand, grab right there by the snap. Now if you grab on the snap itself and he pulls up, that snap's going to hurt your hand. So I grab right below it, right below the snap. So if he pulls, I'm not going to get jerked on by this hard metal. And then I'm going to get right in here with him. And then as soon as he stopped raising his head and moving back, I'm going to release my pressure. So my pressure was I just put my hand underneath his jaw. Now you want to be careful because he might try to rear up in this position. So as he's backing up, I'm here. I'm putting my body away from him just in case he rears up, because I've had horses rear up and strike. Now, if you'll look at my thumb, now I've got my thumb in the corner of his mouth right here. And I'm not going to try to stick it in his mouth. I'm just going to rub on him. Make sure he's okay with that. Now see how he started licking and chewing right there? That's the first sign that he's shown that he's relaxed to my thumb at his mouth. So I'm going to start to stick it in the corner of his mouth. And as soon as he starts licking and chewing, I'm going to rub on him. Now I'm retreating and rubbing on him at the muzzle, at his muzzle. And let's go ahead and take him away from his buddy here.
Stallion.
Oh, Stallion. The Stallion's being distracting. Okay. Now, one of the things you want to do is not preoccupy your hand with too much lead rope. So I just like to even a 14-foot lead rope, I just like to let it be out there in front. And then I'm just dealing with one rope in my hand. If you got a whole bunch of rope in your hand like this, and you're trying to do this, first of all, it's harder to manage him, and secondly, it's dangerous. Because if he goes to pull back or something and you get caught in this rope, it can be very dangerous. I know also somebody that got drugged to death that way. So I just throw it out there. People might think, well, that's on the ground, that's dangerous. No, it's if it's not all tangled up around your feet, it's not dangerous. It's much safer that way, I should say. There's always a danger element to everything with horses. Okay, I'm going to put my hand underneath him and then start to put it in the corner, my thumb in the corner of his mouth. There's a 3 or 4 inch gap between his front teeth and his back teeth. It's called the bar of his mouth, and that's where the bit's going to go, and that's where you're going to put your thumb to get him to open his mouth. So he's just a very reactive horse to the bit in his mouth. Now, we did a little bit of bridling in the clinic with him, but I didn't go through all these steps. I just lowered his head and basically put it on, right? So I want to try to get to the base of the problem, and that is his not liking my hands around his mouth. Notice I'm not trying to bridle him. I'm preparing him to bridle, and then when I go to bridle him, he should be ready and just take the bridle. People want to address the problem by working on the problem itself, but you work on the cause of the problem, which is his reactivity to his mouth. Good boy. And what I'm going to try to do is get him to where he'll let me put my thumb in his mouth, he'll open his mouth, and he'll lower his head at the same time. Or at least not raise his head. Good boy. That was much better. Less reaction there. We're trying to take away the anxiety of bridling. What happens is horses start to get a lot of anxiety with bridling because their owner will try to force that bridle on the horse. There's lots of bridling issues. Most horses, when you're bridling or unbridling, they want to raise their head up. So we want to teach them to lower their head. How do we do that? Get them to...
Just putting your thumb in, feeling around, letting him relax, and then retreat.
Exactly. Putting my thumb in that corner, and then when he opens his mouth and he's relaxed, then I'm going to take my thumb out. Approach again, put my thumb in, and that because I'm on the bar of his mouth, I'm not at risk of being bit there. But I had a lady yesterday working on bridling, and she put her finger or her thumb between the incisors and that next canine tooth, and that's a little spot that if you mess up a little bit, you're going to get bit there. So I like to go behind that canine and work on the bar of his mouth. Good boy.
So you're actually rubbing on his gum.
I'm rubbing on the gum, yeah. They call that the bar. Yep. Yep, and that, you're right. That's the gum of the mouth. That's the gum.
Physically touching his bar.
Yep.
Where the bridle's going to sit.
Exactly, where that bit is going to sit.
The bit.
Now, I don't have to actually go in and touch that bar. If I put my thumb in the corner of his mouth and he opens up, I'm not even going to touch the bar. But now you see how he's starting to tolerate, he's okay with me doing that without raising his head. I'm not trying to force him to lower his head. I'm just working on getting him to relax to my hand in his mouth, and he's naturally lowering his head. Good, and just for the fun of it, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side, because he's a horse that was so sensitive. He's probably going to be sensitive on this side too. Now, will I bridle on this side? No, I'm not going to bridle on this side, but the more I can get him used to my hand around his muzzle and in his mouth, the better off he's going to be. Right there. Good boy. I'm going to go ahead and work on lowering his head from this side too. Good.
So once again, the arm over
the arm over the top of his neck.
To the way, your side is going to be the first thing he would hit if he reacted.
Yep.
Your head's tilted.
Head's tilted away.
You're just rocking back and forth.
Rocking back and forth right there.
Looking for a sign.
All I want to see is him start to lower his head. And now let's do it with my fingers back behind his ear. And I'm pushing just a little bit. Now I'm going to rock back and forth right there. One of the things I like to do when I have my fingers back here behind his ears is when he lowers his head, I like to kind of work through the tuft of his hair right here, just like that. there's a trainer that taught me that, and there's something about it that just helps them to relax. His forelock. Yeah, just moving my fingers through his forelock like this helps him relax. Then go back down, ask him to lower, rock back and forth. Good boy. And then rub on him, fluff his forelock out. Okay, now we'll go back to his mouth, muzzle. So notice I'm not getting in a hurry to bridle him. So if you have a horse that struggles with anything, you want to make sure that you have some time to work with them. At least work with them enough to where you're getting something positive. Let's say I only had 10 minutes to work with Sonny. If I might be able to get him to lower his head and maybe get him to where I could rub on his muzzle a little bit, then I leave and I come back the next day. If I'm busy and I only have a few minutes, just have a plan. In those few minutes, what kind of positive change do you want to make with your horse? And if you can make that positive change in those few minutes, then leave him alone and come back the next day, and you'll start usually at a better spot.
Kid.
I'm trying to nurse. She's a cute filly. Very good. I like where he's at. So let's go back to the other side. As if we were bridling. Now I'm going to do that one more time. Work in his mouth. Make sure that he's relaxed to that. Now I'm going to take this lead rope and I'm going to use it as if it were the bit. Okay, so I'm gonna take it. What I do is I grab it with my right hand. So I'm on his left side. I grab it with my right hand with my thumb pointing down away from the snap. Then I'm gonna take my hand on the other side and I'm gonna hook the halter with my thumb. That way I can kind of control him. Then I'm gonna hook the halter with this thumb. And now, actually, no, I'm just gonna hook with the off thumb. Then I'm gonna take the lead rope in this hand. So now I've got the lead rope with both hands and I can pull it up into his mouth. But I'm not going to force it into his mouth. I'm going to first ask him to open his mouth. And when he does, I'm going to bring that up into his mouth. He's going to chew on it a little bit. Sorry, Steve. Then I'll let him drop it out of his mouth. Good boy. And I do this when I'm just starting horses and teaching them to learn how to have a bit in their mouth. Now right here, he's kind of fighting it, so I'm going to stick with him. All the while paying attention to where my head is. See how my head's tilted away? Good boy. Now if he gets too reactive to this and starts throwing his head up in the air, go back to the start. Work on getting your hand around his muzzle, like right here. He's getting a little reactive to that. So I might go back, rub on him. Ultimately, we want to make a positive change to where he doesn't have issues with this, right? But some horses will struggle a little bit depending on their past and depending on their nature. They may just struggle a little with this more than others. But if you can teach the owner to do this, then it's usually not a very big struggle. He looks like a pretty young horse too, isn't he?
He is. I think he's around 10, 9 or 10.
Yeah, he's still got most of his cups. Which
He came to me skin and bones.
Really? Mm-hmm. Wow. He's a big boy.
From the Amish, Pennsylvania.
Huh. They used him as a draft horse and he probably worked really hard.
This is something you can do every day to get your horse really used to accepting the bit. You can
Absolutely.
do all these techniques every day.
Yep. You can keep doing this. Just work on, if your horse is bothered by his mouth being touched, then you need to work on that. I've learned over the years that if you don't address the problem head on, and you can address it slowly head on, right? You don't have to take it all, you don't have to chew the whole steak at once. You can take a piece at a time. But this is just one of a few things that you can do to help your horse start to relax to something in his mouth, not feel so panicked about it. So I kind of like where he's at right there, so I'm going to go ahead and grab my bridle. Now he's trying to eat there, so I'm going to bump on him. Okay, now I want to see how reactive is he to this bridle? So if I raise the bridle up, is he okay with me doing that? Can I lower his head with the bridle in front of him? Can I lower it with the bridle underneath him? And his front foot, his left foot we're kind of in my way, so I'm going to back him up. There we go. Okay. Let me make sure I understand this bridle.
Goes like that.
Okay. All right. What I like to do is I like to take the headstall in my left hand. Then I'm gonna raise it up, put it like this, so my first finger is over the top, my thumb and my other fingers are underneath it, and I'm gonna bring it up like this. Then I'm gonna take my back hand, my right hand, and go through the ears and grab a hold of it. Now I'm gonna manage his head with the halter at first. So if I got his head low and he's tipped a little bit towards me, you want to make sure when you're haltering or bridling that your horse's nose is tipped towards you. If he's tipped away from you and you're trying to follow him around, don't do that. Bring him to you and make sure he's tipped at least a little bit towards you and his head is down. Then if I have good control and he's not moving, now I'm going to reach under and grab that bit. Now I have a hold of the bit with my left hand and I have a hold of the headstall with my right hand, and I can manage his head like this. Okay, if he tries to move his head away from me. Now I'm going to do just like I did with the lead rope. Put my thumb in there, but my right hand has the bridle, and I'm going to pull it up. Yeah, he definitely doesn't like that, does he?
Oh, it's part of it in his mouth.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. It's like, what's going on?
The full cheek portion is.
So he had the cheek portion in his mouth. He was chewing it. It seemed like he was a little more uncomfortable than... Okay, right there, there's a perfect example of him moving that head down and away from me. So I'm going to manage his head with this halter. This is why, if you have problems bridling, make sure your halter's on your horse and your lead rope. That way you can manage the head easier. If you're trying to bridle them and they're struggling with it and you have just the bridle, it's going to be a lot harder. Okay, and now I'm going to go down. Now I have control of his head. Now I'm going to put my thumb in the corner. He opens his mouth. I pull the bridle up with my right hand. See, my right hand pulled it in. Then I'm going to put his off ear on first, his near ear in second. Take the forelock out of the way. Try to correct his hair a little bit, his mane and his forelock. And I usually don't get it perfect, but okay. Then I put my throat latch on. This is definitely a bit that he doesn't really like being in his mouth. So a horse that is not comfortable with the bit being in their mouth, I might detach these reins, and when I'm tying my horse up for their daily tie, usually when I'm working with horses, I want to tie them up hour to 2 hours after I work with them. Make sure that they learn to stand tied, that they're not going to go straight back to the stall and start eating hay. I might give them a drink of water and then tie them up. I don't want to, that helps reduce, or it helps improve their ability to stand tied and be relaxed doing it. So when I'm doing that and I'm getting my horse to stand there, I might just take these reins off, leave the bridle on, that bit in their mouth, and let them just hang out with the bit in their mouth for a couple hours. That's usually is one of the best things you can do to just help your horse get used to that bit in their mouth. A lot of people will find that a horse doesn't like a bit in their mouth, and they'll try to go to another bit, and then they'll go buy another bit, and before you know it, they've bought 20 bits that are $150, $200 a piece, and they still can't find something that works for their horse. Most things are going to work for your horse, and unless they're actually pinching them, which can be an issue that you have to address. But most of the time, it's just a horse not being used to the bit in their mouth. Ask them to come forward. So Sonny could probably use more of that, just standing tied with the bit in his mouth. Okay, now to take it off, make sure when you're taking the bridle off that your horse either has his head in a lower position and he's either maintaining that position or he lowers even more when you drop the bit out. Most horses will naturally start to realize as the bit comes out, if they raise their head up, that allows the bit to come out quicker. So horses will get in a bad habit of raising their head to get the bit off, to get the bridle off. So what happens in like 9 out of 10 cases, I watch people, they'll go to take the bridle off and the horse does this and they drop the bridle off and then they're done. You want to make sure to try to make sure your horse lowers his head and is either in that lowered position or he's lowering it as you're letting the bit fall out of his mouth. And that's why I like to use these halters, because if I ask, see that's exactly what I'm talking about. I went to take that off and he immediately went to throw his head up. So I'm going to take that off one ear, and I'm going to work on that one ear first. I want to lower the head. I'm just going to use the halter to do it. Lower the head. Put it back on. I want to wait until he's comfortable with that without raising his head. So he's already trying to raise his head as soon as I take it off of the ear. A little better. Lower his head. Lower his head. I might have to do this 100 times. Just depends on how bad the habit is. That was better. So that time he didn't raise his head at all, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the next step. Now the right ear, or the off ear. Now right there he raised his head, so I'm going to lower his head, put that off ear back on. Lower his head, take it off, lower his head, put it on, lower his head, and take it off. A little better, almost there. Wait for it. That quick raise of his head, if I had my head in the wrong position, he would have bopped me. Lower his head. That was a little better. One of the things I forgot to mention is you want to make sure not only are they not sensitive in their mouth, but also are they not sensitive around their ears. So I didn't do that with him, and I probably should have at first, but that was good. You see that? He didn't raise his head. He didn't react to that. Now I'm ready to take the bit out. So now I'm going to allow gravity to start to take the bit, and I keep this, look at how I have this stall in my left hand. I have the halter in my right hand. I have the lead in my right hand. So this is how I do it. When I'm taking it off, I take my left hand, I leave it in my left hand. Take it off the near ear, take it off the far ear, or the off ear, and now I start to lower it. Right there, that was really good. Maybe even ask him to lower again, rub on him. Finish on a low headset. Good boy. And what he's trying to do is root down to the ground, eat a little grass or something. And so I'm actually asking him to sit back up and bring his head back up. This is perfect right here. He's nice and relaxed. Good. Now I'm just going to drop this bridle and let's work on his ears for a second. Make sure, because sometimes you'll get a horse that, let's say they have mites in their ear, you're never going to get them to relax. Or if they have a fungus in their ear, fungus or mites are the two things I've seen where it hurts to touch their ear. So you're not going to get them to relax to their ears being touched unless you fix that problem first. So make sure they don't have mites or a fungus in their ear. A tick. Tick's another one. I've had horses with ticks in their ear and their ear is painful. But other than that, most behavioral issues with horses that don't like their ears being touched, they just need a lot of desensitizing to the touch. Okay, so he's pretty good with that. Okay, remember it's in my left hand. Raise up here. I'm going to lower his head. He's pointing towards me. Switch hands. Take my hand, grab the bit. Now I've got control of him. Now I'm going to ask him to open his mouth. Good. I'm going to ask him to lower his head. pretty good. Now he raised his head there because I was pushing on his cheek with a couple of my fingers to get him to move his head over. I didn't like that he was pulling his head away. They've got a nerve that comes across their cheek. I think it's the facial nerve. You can feel it if you get sensitive enough. You can feel a nerve across there. And I like to just push right on that nerve. And if they really want to move their head away, I'll just start to push on that nerve and ask them to come back to me. But be careful, because sometimes they'll throw their head when you do that. Okay, lower his head. Good. I want to keep reinforcing the idea that when I'm messing with his head, I want his head down here, nice and relaxed. Now I'm actually using the bridle this time, and I'm grabbing the headstall. So I'm supporting myself with the headstall or supporting his head with the headstall instead of doing it with the halter. You can still do it with a halter, but I'm using the headstall as my pressure in my arms.
How do you feel like that adjustment is good on him, the way it's...
The length of the bridle?
Yeah.
Yeah, and let's talk about length of the bridle. A lot of people will have the standard of just like 2 wrinkles in the corner of the mouth, and that's the right length. You have to go a little bit further than that. Sometimes two wrinkles means it's too short, and sometimes 2 wrinkles means it's too long, depending on how he wears it. So a horse that has a wide head, the first thing I want to do is I want to take, first of all, if you're putting the bridle on and it just feels really tight up here, most likely it's too short. You need to lengthen that out first. Then what you want to do is I just grab a hold of the side of the bit and I pull down. And if I can pull down and there's no wrinkle, and I'm not pulling super hard, just a little bit, and there's no wrinkle, it's probably about the right length. The second thing I do, so when you let go, there's going to be a little bit of wrinkle. Some horses will grab the bit and pull it into the corners of their mouth, so there's many wrinkles and it looks like it's really tight on them, but it's actually really loose. It just depends on how they hold that bit. The other thing I'll do is I'll grab the side pieces, the cheek pieces, and I'll pull them out like this. I'll pull them out like this. What I want is about 2 inches between, when I pull out from there to the cheek, about 2 inches, and so that's about just right for him. That looks just right. If you get out further than that, sorry buddy, so he's real sensitive around his head. So one of the things we can do with him is desensitize with the flag around his head, desensitize with my hands, get him to where he's not bothered by this. I might even take my hat and desensitize a little bit with my hat, retreat, rub on him. So he didn't like that. Yeah, very, very reactive to that. So let's just work on that for a second. Now I have a hold of the lead rope. Actually, let me just put the reins over the top of his head here. Lower his head. So this is all, bridling is mostly probably a symptom of his issue of just being kind of a head shy horse. Lower that head. Good boy. Okay, I'm just gonna get his throat latch attached. So hopefully that helped with the length of the bridle.
Yeah.
I test it manually. I pull down on the bit here to make sure the wrinkles are gone, and then I also pull out on the sides. Those are the 2 ways that I check it. Well, the third is also when I'm putting it on, does it feel really tight? Or if I put it on and he's got the bit way down here, he's almost dropping it out of his mouth, obviously it's too long. Okay, real quick, just because, yeah, well, let's go over here. We'll do a flag and my hat, desensitize. Because Sonny is real reactive to my hat, he's probably going to be really reactive to this flag. So I'm just going to work on a little desensitizing with the flag.